church, let's dive in today to week one of this series, You Asked For It. And what we're doing is over the next 4 weeks, we're tackling questions that you asked for in a survey that we gave out on Easter Sunday of this year. And it was a special survey, and we had people list out and write in some of their most common questions, things that they would love to have discussed. And so we'll be talking about heaven and the end times in 1 week, and next week going to talk about how to deal with worry and manage stress. And I mean, I think this is a tough topic that we all deal with, and it's definitely a very felt needs type issue. But if we're looking back to the scriptures, we recognize that this is an issue that even Jesus dealt with, and that's dealing with difficult people. Dealing with difficult people. You'd have thought that Jesus might have done some interviewing before he picked those 12 guys he picked, because he didn't pick the most qualified when he gathered his closest friends around him. And those dudes had some issues. I mean, if anybody had to work with some difficult people, Jesus had to work with some difficult people. He had a tax collector. He had some guys that turned their back on him, that said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to follow you." You remember Peter? He had some hotheads like Peter. He had some stubborn folks like John. He had some guys that would talk good to his face and then turn their back on him and betray him. We remember Judas. And so I think that we're in good company this morning. Anybody in the room, you have anybody in your life that is a little bit difficult to work with? That was just to see if your arm functions correctly, all right? We all deal with difficult people. And actually, I'm going to set this message up with a passage from 2 Timothy. And I've been at the portion during the year of my read through the Bible during the year. I've been walking through Timothy the last couple of weeks. And man, what a practical letter that Paul writes to his son in the faith, Timothy. And if you're looking, next to James, I think Timothy is one of the most practical books in all the Bible. Definitely speaks to where we're at and some of these issues. And he's talking to Timothy how to deal with the church, how to deal with people issues. And so if you've got your notes, go ahead and grab your notes. We're going to dive in and look together at this really hot topic, how to handle difficult people and deal with people in our lives who are maybe going through struggles. But 2 Timothy 2, verses 23 and 24, it says this. It says, "Again I say, Timothy, don't get involved in foolish, ignorant arguments that only start fights. A servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but must be kind to who? To everyone." That's right, everyone. So everyone must be able to teach and be patient with friendly people. No, what does it say there? Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to get along with friendly people, isn't it? But he says, must be patient with difficult people. Man, this is such a struggle for us. And I think there's a lot of different kinds of difficult people, and maybe this would identify you this morning. This is not a message for nudging your neighbor, because I think we all, at some time or another, we are the difficult person. And so let me just throw out 7 or 8 little buzzwords or keywords I think identify some of our own struggles and things that we've probably seen in some other people. You've got the first kind of difficult person. They're the hammer. They're the hammer. Throw that picture up there. The hammer. This type of person, they're the aggressive. They're the harsh person. They're the person that you're always wrong and I'm always right. Come on, does anybody know have a hammer in your life? They're the ones that use intimidation to get their point or get their way across. The second one, you got the hammer, and then you've got the megaphone person, all right? The megaphone person, they're that person that loves to talk all the time. They're the person that loves to talk so much that you finally reach your place that you'll go with their idea just if they'll just stop talking. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, whatever you want, as long as you stop talking, I'll go your way. You've got the hammer, you got the megaphone, then you've got the space cadet. You've got the space cadet. The space cadet, they live in their own world. You talk to them and try to help them understand, but they're not even home. It doesn't matter what you say. It's going in one ear and right out the other. You got the space cadet. Then you got the clam. All right, the clam. They are good at the silent treatment. Anybody know some people that work the silent treatment, all right? They manipulate you with the mute button. Come on. Their way of getting their point across, Jen, do not amen this really loud, all right? They get their point across. They usually respond with words like, I'm fine. I'm fine, I'm okay. And you know they're not fine and they're okay, right? They shut you off. They put up a wall. They're a clam. They're like that gorilla right there in the picture. Or then there's the volcano. There's the volcano, right? They're fine, and then they explode. All right? They hold everything in until the moment that they can't handle it anymore, and everything comes out. Not just from today, but from the last 10 years. All right? They're a volcano that's just been stewing, brewing, waiting to erupt. Not only you have the volcano, you have the bubble buster. All right? This is the next kind of difficult person. The bubble buster is the one, my kid did so good in that soccer game. Man, your kid didn't do good at all. They're the bubble buster. Man, I had such a great day at work. Man, I think you're going to get fired next week. It doesn't matter what you say. They've got something negative to come right behind you. Come on, you got some bubble busters in your life, right? You got the bubble buster, and then you've got the crybaby. That's right, you got the crybaby. Come on. They just whine. And they whine to the point that you're like, okay, man, I just can't take it anymore. Whatever you want. They're a chronic complainer. And some of you've got this person in your work environment. You know that the way they get stuff done is they pout about it until finally the boss is like, you know what, let's just go along because we can't handle another hour of this woman or man. I got to be careful right there. That was a slip. And I caught myself. I did really good, didn't I? And they pout their way into getting their way. And then you've got the garbage collector. And this kind of difficult person, they replay and they rehearse their pain. They hold onto their stuff and they're carrying their garbage around into the next relationship, into the next event. And they're holding on to stuff. Well, man, I still, they reach a bad place in their life and they're still remembering that you took the last piece of toast in 1983, at that breakfast. They're holding on to the baggage, and they're driving around on the side of that garbage truck everywhere they go saying, look, I'm still holding on to the pain. And they never reach a place of freedom. And you can never find a place of joy and peace in your relationship because all they can do is bring up the garbage. And I don't know if this identifies people in your life or if this identifies you. I think probably both, because we all, if we're being real this morning, we're all difficult people. We all have seasons where we go through struggles and issues. And here's the deal, is that the enemy works hardest to destroy our lives by disrupting our relationships. The enemy works the hardest in our lives to destroy our lives by disrupting our relationships. And there's two reasons why. Because relationships provide our greatest joys. But you know what? Relationships also are many times the source of our greatest pain. Isn't that interesting? Relationships, they bring us the greatest joy. Because we were created for a relationship. God created us to be in love with Him and to love people. So relationships bring us the greatest joys, but relationships also can create the greatest pain. And so the enemy will do anything he can to build up a wall between us and the people that God loves and that we should love. And so often what we do is we get stuck at the symptoms and the outer part of our relationships. We get stuck on people's issues and never really dive down to the heart of the issue. And I want to dive in for a moment to the heart of the issue, but I want to set this up with a quick little story. It was this Monday, this past week, and I'll tell you this story, it set this message up perfectly as I was planning it. But I reached out to a roofer who had done some work on my house in Pinellas County. And during the Hurricane Hermine, we had some issues and had to have somebody come out. And so for the last few weeks, I had been just reaching out to this guy about once a week. Hey, there's some paperwork that I needed from him. And it hit me Monday morning. I was like, man, I still don't have that paperwork. I sent the guy a text message. And I said, hey, I thank you. I just want to thank you so much for the great job you did on the house. I just need you to know, hey, today I really need this paperwork to wrap some things up here. And it was about 5 minutes later. Mondays are kind of like my Sabbath, and I was taking some time I was listening to a podcast, and so thank God I was close to God at the moment that I got his response. You know what I'm saying? Because depending on how your relationship with God in a moment can really impact the way you respond to a difficult person. Come on, somebody say, oh me. Oh me, and he just sent me one word. And it was a word that described an animal with 4 legs and an opening, like a hole. You know what I'm saying? A 4-legged animal and a hole. So I will leave it right there. And I thought, dear God, what, and it wouldn't be a word that I would want to repeat in church. And I thought, what did I do to this guy? I mean, he woke up on the wrong side of the bed, so I call him, and he doesn't answer the phone. I said, I'm going to call him again. I called him again, and I left him a voicemail. I said, and thank God I was right with Jesus in that moment. I said, man, I just want to thank you so much for the job you did on my house. I don't know what I said in that text message that would have upset you, or man, I don't know what I did wrong, but would you please forgive me? I said, man, if there's anything that I said or did that hurt your feelings or was inappropriate, I apologize. I didn't mean to do that. A few minutes went by, and I got a text message, and he sent a response. It was confusing to me. He said, you're not the 4-legged animal. He said, I'm the 4-legged animal with the hole. And, okay. He said, man, I'm having some struggles this morning. I said, what? I responded back. I said, hey, well, if there's anything I've done, if there's anything that, I can be there with you, through, man, I'm here. And he responded back. He said, no, I don't think you understand. I was upset with my wife this morning when I left the house, and I meant to send her that message. But I got it. I said, well, man, if there's anything that I can pray or encourage you about. Man was having a rough morning. I was the brunt of his frustration. And man, I think we've all been there where we've got that text before. Somebody difficult, a difficult person in our life, were responding to us in a way. And ultimately, we were feeling the heat of their frustration, but there was something deeper going on. Here's why I shared the story. Because we need to understand that when it comes to difficult people and how we respond to difficult people, we need to dig deeper than the surface issues. Because beneath and behind this front of the garbage collector and the volcano and whatever their symptom, whatever their front is, there's somebody that's going through some issues. And there's three deep issues that every single person is dealing with. Here, if you're taking notes, it's probably one of these 3 things. Number 1, it's sin. It's sin. There's something, and we all know this because we all deal with it. It's Romans 3:21. We've been separated from sin. We've been separated for all have sinned. All means that means you too. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. It's what separates us from God. And oftentimes it's our sin that keeps us from loving people the way we should, from responding to people the way we should. And we need to understand that when people are operating out of their hurt and operating out of their sin, they're really not being who God created them to be. That's why when I'm operating out of my flesh and out of my sin, I've told you this before, I think, but Jen doesn't even call me Wes. When I'm operating out of my flesh, she calls me Randall, everybody. She just let me know in a nice, loving way, you need to go spend some time with Jesus. You know, my parents did this as a kid because my full name is Randall Wesley, and so when I was acting up, it wasn't Wes anymore, it was Randall Wesley Morris II. You know, when you were in trouble, you got called by your full name. We need to understand when we're not operating in who God called us and created us to be, our sin nature oftentimes gets the best of us. Maybe for some of us, maybe it's not sin, but for some people, it's their shame. It's their shame. And we need to understand today that hurting people hurt people. Hurting people hurt people. And most of the time, people who are treating us and throwing stuff our way and saying things that we know aren't true are ultimately inside, they're hurting. They're hurting. And the question we need to ask everybody is not, why did they do that to me? The question we need to ask is, where are they hurting? Where are they hurting? Because we can respond and we can react to people's hurtful words and hurtful attitudes, but ultimately, it's going to create frustration. It's going to create a good argument. And it's going to create something in us that's not of God. When we respond out of our hurt. Hurting people hurt people. We need to understand, people that are operating and walking in their shame, they can only reproduce the same thing. Man, it's the love of God that can break that down. The third thing I think that so often it's a DNA for difficult people. The third one is it's selfishness. It's selfishness. Look what James, one of my favorite books in all the Bible, in chapter 4, James instructs us and reminds us about selfishness. He says, in the Message paraphrase, it says, where do you think all these appalling wars and quarrelsome fights and social media arguments? Well, no, I just added that one in there, but it fits, doesn't it? He said, where do you think all these things come from? Do you think they just happen? Well, think again. They come about because we want our own way. And we fight for it deep inside ourselves. You lust for what you don't have and are willing to kill to get it. You want what isn't yours and will risk violence to get your hands on it. He says, man, selfishness will lead us to death. Selfishness has a way of destroying the heart of Christ and the love of Jesus in our life. And man, when we operate out of selfishness, it leads us to a place of bitterness. And I think we have to make the choice today. Are we going to be people that get bound up in what people say and do and the way they treat us? Because that'll lead us to frustration. Are we going to walk in the love of God, which sets us free not to be bitter, but to get better? Everybody, when we walk in freedom, we walk in the love of God, it sets us free not to get bitter over what somebody says and does and deals with them on a surface level, but it causes us to see people with the eyes of Jesus. It causes us to get better. And I don't know what person you're thinking about in your life right now that you're like, you know what, I need to have a conversation. I need to treat them differently. I need to walk into work tomorrow morning with a different attitude, with a different filter about the way I'm going to love them regardless of how they act and how they react. Man, I'm going to be the hands and feet of Jesus to people that desperately need the hope of God. And I want to give you 3 ways to deal with those people. 3 ways to deal with those people as it relates to not getting bitter, but getting better. Number 1, we need to recognize that we can't fix them. We need to recognize that we can't fix them. We can't fix them, but here's what we can do. We can love them. We can love them. And love will break down walls. It'll break down barriers. It'll break down frustration. I don't know if the difficult person in your life is your wife or your husband or your kids or your parents or somebody at work, but I'm telling you, the love of God can break through every wall. It can break through every barrier. Man, if we would just follow this outline, it's 1 Corinthians 13. You know, it's a passage we often hear at weddings or ceremonies. But man, I love the way, I want to do something unique here this morning. And I think this is just this portion of this passage is something that you can take with you this week. Maybe you need to put it on your dashboard. But I'm telling you, just look at this with me, the way the message paraphrase sums the way we love people. It says, love never gives up. Love cares more for others than for self. Love doesn't want what it doesn't have. Love doesn't strut. It doesn't have a swelled head. It doesn't force itself on others. Isn't always me first. Doesn't fly off the handle. It doesn't keep score of the sins of others. It doesn't revel when others grovel. It takes pleasure in the flowering of truth. It puts up with anything. It trusts God always. It always looks for the best. It never looks back, but keeps going to the end. Let me just ask if you just took this text right here, would you say, you know what? That's just kind of a summary of my life right now. That's just, you know what? Paul was writing about me when he wrote the love chapter, I think. But let me ask you for a second. Just do this with me. Why don't you insert your name into 1 Corinthians 13 for a second? And just see how this begins to take new life. And maybe help you see this in a whole new way. Just insert your name. Wes never gives up. Go back to the first one. Wes never gives up. Jeff never gives up. Jim never gives up. Angela never gives up. I was just pointing out the people who are sleeping in the room. No, I'm just kidding. I was just kidding. Hey, Wes never gives up. Wes cares more for others than himself. Wes doesn't want what he doesn't have. He doesn't strut, doesn't have a swelled head. He doesn't force himself on others or isn't always me first. He doesn't fly off the handle. Wes doesn't keep score when Jen messes up. He doesn't revel when others grovel. But man, he takes pleasure in truth. Wes, he loves so much, he's willing to put up with anything. He trusts God always, no matter what situation is going on in his life. Wes is constantly looking out for the best in other people. And no matter what failures, no matter what faults, no matter what he faces today or this afternoon, or no matter what tragedy or circumstance hits his life, he's never going to look back. But he's going to keep going to the end. I don't know about you. This could change the way we live our lives, church. This could change the trajectory of where we're going. If we would just begin to live out 1 Corinthians 13 and go, you know what, God? In my strength, I'm empty and my weak. I can't deal with difficult people. But your love flowing through me, God, I can put up with anything. because I believe your joy can give me strength in the middle of my weakness. Man, I believe that, God, your peace can help me when I'm frustrated. And when I'm weak, God, I'm going to lean on your strength. And God, when I'm in a difficult situation, I'm going to hide in the cleft of the rock because I know that there is safety there. And I know that you're with me every single step of the way. If you believe it, somebody say amen. Amen, amen. Recognize that you can't fix people. Number two, when you're dealing with difficult people, refuse to get even. Refuse to get even. And I think this is probably most people's greatest struggle. This is most people's greatest struggle because we're always waiting for that person to as soon as they'll do the right thing, then Pastor Wes, I'm going to do the right thing too. And God's saying, hey, love no matter what. Love no matter what. Regardless of the outcome, regardless of what they do. He says, this is kind of a basic word. Yeah, I'm telling you, if we would do this right, we'd see our whole city change for Jesus Christ. We would see our whole family on Thanksgiving operate in a whole new way. I mean, man, our holidays might be different and we started loving people. Let this sink into us. Look at what 1 Peter 3:9 says. It says, don't repay evil for evil. Don't retaliate with insults when people insult you. Instead, pay them back with a blessing. That is what God has called you to do. And he will grant you. What does it say? He will grant you his blessing. How do I get God's blessing? Stop insulting people when they insult you. When they do evil against you, keep loving them. He will command a blessing in our life. Here's the deal that one guy said is so good, is that you can't fly with eagles when you're hanging with the turkeys. If you want to soar with God, refuse to get even. Fly above it. Number three, we got to rise above it. We've got to rise above it. Recognize that you can't fix people, but love them. Refuse to get even, but forgive them. And three, rise above it. Matthew 5:44, Jesus, this Sermon on the Mount, it's one of the greatest texts in all the Bible, as Jesus gives us so much application, how to live our lives. He says, but I say, this is setting this passage up, the religious leaders come to him and they're trying to catch him, and they're saying, well, the scripture says, and they always try to get Jesus on the scripture, and he just kind of always throws it back in their face. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And if somebody does you wrong, well, repay them back equally. And Jesus says, hey, hang on. I tell you this, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. You want to rise above the people and the challenges and the circumstances in your life? Start by praying for them. So simple, yet so difficult to do when you're mad at somebody. It's hard to be mad at somebody and pray for them. And here's the deal. This is so good. I'd love for you to leave with this. Praying for someone may or may not change them. Understand me, church. Praying for somebody may or may not change them, but it will always change you. Praying for somebody may or may not change them, but at 100% of the time, it'll change you. Ephesians 4:32, instead, be kind to each other, Paul writes. He says, tender-hearted, forgiving one another just as God, through Christ Jesus, has forgiven you. Here's the deal, church. When we just consider this morning how much Christ has forgiven us, how much Jesus laid out his life and poured out his love for us, how can we not, in turn, love and forgive the world? Jesus told us. Paul wrote it and said, if you want the world to know how much I love them, then you start loving them. It's 1 John. By this, all the world will know because of your love for one another. Church, we can change the world. And we can love difficult people. As much as you're sitting there going, I don't think so, Pastor Wes. I don't know about this. Let me tell you, we can. And it doesn't start by God changing them. It starts by God changing us. And as God changes us, we can pour his love out to people who are hurting. Can somebody say amen?